So, good afternoon for those that the time is 9 minutes past 12 o'clock. For the rest of the people, good morning. Still, we are very glad that we are starting through the Athena European University, the Athena Observatory, the Athena Research Work Package, our collaboration with the Foresight Institute of the European Commission. I would like to thank very much Mr. Bladen. His name, he's going to say his name by himself. I cannot pronounce. For the introduction with the Foresight, we talked before we start with Laurent. Also, for more input from the Foresight through the Athena, the development of training programs through the Athena regarding the Foresight policies for making a competence network that other universities they are following. So we would like to deepen to make this relationship and this collaboration beyond this beyond this first lecture. A few words about Laurent Bontoux. He's an environmental engineer. He has a great experience in industry. He has worked as a chemical engineer in relative industry. He has been involved in European Commission regarding science policy interface, and he has worked more than 10 years in the Foresight institution that together with Erica have developed what he's going to present in the next 20-25 minutes, and then we're going to have, I hope, a very fruitful discussion with him. So, Laurent, thank you very much for your contribution to our European University, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kostas. Thank you very much for having invited us to present our work to you in Foresight. So I will share my screen and pass a few slides. Here. Let's reduce this and let's go into a slideshow. Can everybody see my slides?
Correct. We can see your slides. Thank you.
So, perfect. So my name is Laurent Bontoux, and together with Erica Bull, we work at the Competence Center on Foresight of the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. This Competence Center has been created in 2017 to really bring the practice of foresight to policy making at European Union level. So here I'm presenting to you the simplified policy cycle that the EU uses for supporting its work, where on the outside you've got a description of the main phases of the policy cycle, which starts from the top with anticipate, plan, develop strategy. Then you move towards assessing the impacts, when you design the policies. Then you prepare the regulatory text. You adopt the policy initiatives at Commission level. Then you move into the negotiations with the Council and the Parliament, and sometimes also at international level. And then once your legislation is adopted, you move to implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of your policy. And that closes, the policy cycle. And of course, to do all this, you've got a number of support functions which are necessary. So like collaboration across policy areas to increase, the coherence of policy. You have to communicate, with your stakeholders or with other parties. You have to engage with the stakeholders, consult the public, use evidence, of course. And then support the policy process by different means. Anyway, so that's the basic simplified theoretical background for our work. So in that context, why would people want to apply foresight? And what we've discovered is that foresight is actually very powerful to help people develop systemic thinking and strategic thinking. And also because of these systematic and systemic participatory processes that foresight uses, we also found that people think critically better when they use foresight. And foresight also helps them reassess assumptions, which are very often unsaid, and unexpressed in the policymaking process. And sometimes they're just wrong. And so foresight is there to actually help question that and readjust. Foresight can also help create visions for the long term, that can contribute to set policy agendas. And because of its very participatory and inclusive nature, foresight helps stakeholders create communities of understanding. So that's a group of people actually developing the same understanding of an issue. It doesn't mean that they necessarily all have to agree on what they want to do forwards, but at least they understand the issue all in the same way. And then, of course, foresight produces, reports like, everything else. But here, the process, this inclusive participatory process, is at least as important as the output, because it creates these communities of understanding, it creates networks of people, it deepens people's understanding of issues. And so the process itself has got a lot of added value. And in the end, what we want to do with foresight is also to build collective intelligence, bring people from very diverse backgrounds, diverse perspectives, diverse fields of expertise together to actually deepen the understanding of very complex issues we have to deal with. So why foresight for better policymaking? Here, when people started to reflect about how to improve the quality of policymaking at the EU level, we started to look at what kind of competences, what kind of skills, would be needed for this. And here, we've discovered that foresight actually brings, and this model of developing competences for policymaking provides a framework that allows people who are going to be policymakers for the long term, for their whole career, to engage in a long-term development of their competences for policymaking. And this competence development framework also can help the hierarchy inform the development of career guidance. You are a head of unit, you're a director in the commission, you've got staff, some with experience, some with less experience, but then at least you've got an overall framework that can help you understand how best to orient people towards training and to improve their overall policymaking skills. And that, of course, links to capacity building, to actually the development of trainings that you can send your people to improve the quality of EU policymaking. And this framework actually belongs to, it expresses a certain vision of policymaking where we want to increase the capacity to use evidence for better policymaking, and also the capacity to innovate in our approaches to policymaking and to adapt to the very fast changing circumstances in order to maintain a robust policymaking practice at the European Commission level. And also this competence progression model provides a systematic overview of whatever skills and competences are needed for the policymaking profession. So in order to help the Commission actually reach increasingly complex policy objectives in the current period, in the current challenges, we have developed actually 6 main clusters of competences. One, which is really foundational, is evidence-informed policymaking. We want to be able to develop policies and to build our policies on the best available evidence, and not only scientific evidence, but also evidence coming for things like foresight. Also, it's extremely important in this current VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world, to develop critical thinking and to develop systematic and systemic thinking. Because the world is very complex, we have to be able to do this as best we can. Also, because the level of complexity is so high, it is beyond the expertise of any single person. Therefore, we have to develop collaboration skills. People have to be able to work together to be able to address the challenges we're facing. Linked to this, of course, is communication. I mean, that's a no-brainer. It's a classic. Also, citizens' engagement, and not just citizens' consultation. You know, we have to be able to also extract the wisdom and the desires from citizens in order to build better policies. And then last but not least, foresight, you know, futures literacy, anticipation and foresight, because the changes that we are undergoing are subject to dynamics which deal with the long term. It's not things that you solve in 6 months. You know, we're talking about, when we talk about climate change, for example, we talk about developments over 30 years, 50 years, 100 years. We have to be able to actually develop a good understanding of the long term. So this is how all these groups of competences are presented within the policy making cycle. You know, we have this kind of flower where we have to be able to develop the competence in engaging with citizens and stakeholders, collaborating, communicating, you know, advising the political level, innovating in policy making, working with evidence, and also being futures literate. So this is the same picture, but developed. So you see that behind the main branches of the flower, you've got sub-branches, you know, which shows the level of detail that we have been able to pursue in developing this framework for competences to support policy making. So in innovating, for example, the branch B, you know, we have under this, we have creative thinking, we have got systemic thinking, we've got critical thinking, we've got learning and unlearning, and we've got managing transformation. So we have a set of sub groups of competences. And then D is be futures literate. So that's what is linked to the use of foresight. And here we've got 4 sub branches. So one is the anticipatory mindset. The other one is scanning for change, then understanding change, and then finally influencing change. So we see a progression in the degree of understanding and capacity to mobilize futures thinking for policy making. So overall, the framework, we've got, of course, levels of competence, you know, to be able to allow us to measure the progression that people are making towards acquiring these skills. The first level is foundational, so that's really basic. So when you don't know very much about this particular skill and it's the entry level, that's what we call foundational. Intermediate, in the case of foresight, for example, it means that you're able to understand the methods, roughly speaking, you're able to request foresight studies, and you're able to actually use the results of foresight work performed by somebody else. At the advanced level, it means that you're able to apply some of the methods yourself. You know, you're able to actually mobilize your knowledge for the long term. And at expert level, you're really able to engage with other people and actually push through change processes which rely on in-depth and long-term foresight methods. So before going any further into the competences for futures literacy, I want to make a distinction between the 2 layers of futures literacy, what I call the 2 layers. The first layer is anticipation. Anticipation, to take a metaphor, you know, of driving, for example, is something that the drivers always do. You know, you're on the road behind the steering wheel of your car. You anticipate all the time, meaning that you try to, you have a sense of what might happen to the car in front of you, to the traffic lights, you know, at the next crossroads, you know, to somebody popping out from the right in the side street. You know, you use an understanding and extrapolation in the very short-term future to be able to optimize the quality of your driving. You know, that's really the anticipation. But when driving, you can also think about, you know, let's say using your car to go on holidays, let's say at the seaside, you know, next summer. For this, you might, you know, want to drive for 1,000 kilometers or more, you know, and here you're going to use a very different type of understanding of the future. Here, you're going to be able to say, okay, I want to go from A to B. It's 1,000 kilometers. Then I have the choice of, this road or that road. So this road might be faster, but could be more expensive because you've got road tolls. This road might be a bit longer, but it's much nicer, quieter, better landscapes. You can think about, okay, what kind of weather am I going to have? Will we have storms? What's the likelihood of, or is it likely to have roadworks on the road? So you can start to imagine different strategies to prepare your trip, next year. And so that requires strategic thinking. This requires creating possible alternatives towards the future. And that's what we relate to really foresight. Foresight is more thinking about the long term, thinking in scenarios, and going much more in depth in understanding the future. So going into the details of this competence progression model for futures literacy, I think the first thing is, scanning the horizon, being aware, of your environment relating the future. So here, the basic attitude you need is recognizing the need of policy action in view of the changes that you see occurring, or you feel that they're about to occur. And then you have to be able to connect this to your policymaking work. Okay, and so that means that you really need to develop the understanding of a number of links between elements of things which are happening around you. So at the foundational level, you have to be able to understand what policy action might be needed in reaction to changes that you see occurring, are about to occur. At the intermediate level, you can start to make sense of these observed changes. You understand the drivers of these changes, and you start to have an idea of the likely short-term consequences of these changes. At the advanced level, you can connect all this to your own policymaking work and possibly to related policy areas, and you can start to actually prepare adaptation of your policy to deal with this. And then at the expert level, of course, you can understand, the range of possible consequences of all the changes that you're observing, but also the connections, between other changes and other policy areas. And then you can start to actually implement a number of actions accordingly. At the next level, I think what's interesting is to be able to be curious and observing. That curiosity is always a very interesting and important skill in foresight. And at that level, you're not passive, just observing, but you could also actively keeping track of a number of changes that are happening, possibly monitoring them, going as far as understanding trends coming from the past and try to see and understand whether these trends are likely to continue towards the future or not. And here, what you do is that you start to get organized, to monitor these changes. So you read a broad range of sources, you talk to people, you are actively trying to make sense of what's going on at the same time that you're observing what's going on. So that means that at the intermediate level, you can even start to develop tools, specific structures to help you do that more systematically. And then at the advanced level, you start to be able to organize what we call sense making. You talk to other people, you bring other people together to discuss about all the changes that are occurring and how to make sense of them. And you can make use of this in your own policymaking work. And at the expert level, actually you understand already the different types of trends, how they interrelate, how they affect different domains, sets of megatrends, for example, together, and to see how they are likely to affect the policy topic you're interested in. And then you can actually use a number of tools that can help you do that well. And then finally, the affecting change, here you're really engaging in the systemic understanding, in an interrelation of elements of policy. You're really able to engage with complexity, and you start to be able to consider alternative scenarios of how things could pan out in the future. So at the foundational level, you can start to describe a system and what the drivers of that system are going to be, if you want to understand the change of the system going towards the future. Typically, people then discover the STEEP framework, this famous set of 5 letters, like S for society, T for technology, E for environment, the second E for economics, and the P for policy. So that's the basic framework to help people take a 360-degree perspective at looking at the system. Then some people change the order of the letters or can add 1 or 2 letters if they are more specifically interested in some other factors. But that's really the basic foundational level at that stage. And here at the intermediate level, you can start to get an understanding and a feeling for the direction of things, the direction things could take, how the system could be made to evolve in one direction rather than in another. You can identify and prioritize which are the most important drivers. At the advanced level, that's where you start to be able to make scenarios, proper scenarios. You can envision diverse, complex futures, and you understand the sets of uncertainties that we have to deal with, and this systemic understanding you can extend to your policy area. And you can start to actually use foresight methods to do this in a more structured way. And at the expert level, you can actually use the scenarios you've been able to make at the advanced level to stress test policies, for example, to communicate to people, to get them to change their ways, to convince people about possible ways forward. You understand the dynamics of these systems, the possible interactions between the different stakeholders, the multiple policies that can be affected, in different scenarios. So there you really reach the understanding of the highest level of complexity going towards the future. And that's where you start to enter in the influencing change area, where in addition to being able to consider different scenarios, you start to be able to look at long-term visions and how the long-term visions can be used to actually change the behavior of the actors today to actually evolve towards a desired future. So that's really empowering in terms of making people change. You have evolved in the first stages from understanding what's going on, understanding the dynamics going forward, understanding how open the future is and considering scenarios, now reaching the stage where you actually mobilize people to change in a certain different direction. Okay, so that's really developing helping groups of people actually develop a deep understanding of dynamics and of where these dynamics could bring us towards the future. And then make sure that then you generate the shared vision to make sure that everybody is going to want to evolve towards this same future that we want to build together. And that can help you, you can help that by constructing things like roadmaps, for example, to help people realize what steps would have to be taken from today on to actually reach the future that we want. So all this is quite complex. It's quite comprehensive. I'm ready to answer any question you might have afterwards. I don't want to spend too much time going into these details now because otherwise it becomes too much and it's a bit too much information to digest in one go. But we're using this kind of knowledge in what we call the better regulation toolbox. So a couple of years ago, the Commission has engaged in what it calls better regulation. So in order to improve its capacity to do good policy making. And linked to this, we have developed a toolbox. And for a long time, the toolbox was just standard, let's say, policy making tools, like about communication, about, establishing baselines, economic modeling, things like that. And now we've been able to include foresight also in the better regulation toolbox. And we've done this because we want to be able to use foresight in ex-ante impact assessments. So that means that if you develop a policy before implementing it, you want to have an idea of what this policy could achieve. So we can use foresight to do this. We use that based on a set of reference scenarios about the future of the EU that we have developed ourselves. And that allows us to actually stress test policy options. If people develop a regulation, and they have, 3 possible ways forward in terms of implementing it, then we can use these scenarios to have a better understanding of what would be the pros and cons of each approach to implement our policy. And foresight allows us to do this, what I call beyond modeling. The traditional way is to have an economic model, you just plug your figures in. But if you do this, the model actually translates just one understanding of how things could develop towards the future. Thanks to foresight, you can go beyond this and not only consider different approaches to implementing policies, but also you can take into account parameters which are not quantifiable, like values, for example, while in traditional modeling, you're limited to quantifiable parameters. And foresight also helps you more easily take a very long-term perspective, meaning, minimum 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, and sometimes even longer. And also consider the future as being open, as being something that one builds through policy making, while models tend to just extrapolate how things are happening today. And so that's really a major difference that foresight brings into this policy making. So in a nutshell, that's why I wanted to talk to you as an introduction today. Thank you very much for your attention. And I'm going to stop sharing and be ready to answer any question that people might have.
Thank you very much. The way that you stop your presentation is a commitment of you to us, because you just said this is just an introduction. So we're expecting you to give us more presentations and more information through a series of lectures. So thank you very much for this. I have some questions, but I will give the floor to the audience if you have some questions to Laurent to ask them directly. I can see a clapping from Asta. She liked very much your presentation, as all of us, I suspect. And the question, I give the floor to Denise, a colleague of ours from Austria. So Denise, the floor is yours.
Thank
from
you so much.
Corinthia University of Applied Sciences.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you for this wonderful presentation. I've been involved in foresight and intelligence analysis for quite some while. And I was really wondering which methods you're using and how you apply them, because I assume there's a lot of data, especially if you do it on EU level, and how you go about.
Wow, that's a broad question. Actually, we apply lots of methods. Most of our work is actually demand driven. And so every request is different. So essentially what we do is we apply horizon scanning. So we have a routine horizon scanning exercise. We use this to feed, stuff on a regular basis, let's say to our hierarchy, but we also use it to feed what we call our megatrends hub. So we have on our website 14 megatrends that we monitor and update. So far we've tried to do it every year, but I think we're going to shift to doing it every only 2 or 3 years, because by definition they don't change so fast. So we do that. Of course, we develop scenarios. So we do a lot of scenario work, and we do this using both inductive and deductive methods. And so the reference scenarios I was talking about, for example, we developed using an inductive method, but we also often develop scenarios using deductive methods. Of course, then scenarios are, for us, they are just tools. They're not an end in themselves. So we also explore scenarios. So we use a tool called the scenario exploration system that helps people understand what's
Cool, sí.
We've applied recently the futures triangle. So we really apply a very broad range of methods from the foresight toolbox. Foresight toolbox is very rich, so there's always something new to be dug from this. But really, because of the diversity of requests that we have, we really apply a very broad range of methods. I think recently what we've tried to do in developing the application of foresight for ex-ante impact assessments of policies is to actually use scenarios to stress test policy options. So essentially, you take a policy, you ask people, okay, what are the options that you're considering, going forward with this policy? Then we take these options and we travel through different scenarios with these options, and that allows us to see what are the pluses and minuses, of all the policy options, and it deepens people's strategic understanding of their policies, before actually making a choice. So we're starting to do these kind of things too. So I mean, we could talk for a while, but we do apply a very broad range of methods.
Thank you. That's super interesting for me.
Do we have any other question from the audience? Until the next question will appear, if it will appear, I have some questions for you, Laurent. First of all, I would like to ask you. You mentioned that about 40 mega trends, and you are following these 40 mega trends, and you update what is happening.
14.
14. Okay, 14. Okay. How do you update them? By following the research bibliography, by following reports from the industry? How do you do this?
We do this. So yes, we do read a lot of stuff, but we don't do this like that by a literature review. What we do is that we organize participatory workshops. So we really develop collective intelligence. Essentially, we try to find a number of colleagues, with diverse expertise related to that megatrend. And then we bring them together on a periodic basis, connected to horizon scanning exercise. I'm going to put actually the link to the megatrend in the chat.
Oh,
the Megatrends Hub.
Excellent.
So what we've tried to do it, once a year. So we bring together 10, 12, people from different parts of the commission, sometimes also external experts, and we connect this to, we feed that with the results of our horizon scanning work that we've been doing over the past year, for example. And then we organize a structured reflection process to update the megatrends. So in the megatrends, we see three parts. Essentially, you've got the historical part. So you've got the part coming from the past, fairly far in the past, that helped us actually establish the trend. Then we look at, the recent changes over the last, let's say, 1 to 2 to 3 years. Okay, so are they indications? Are they subtrends first of all, and are there indications that this trend might start to shift, to change towards something else? So that's the second part. And then we've got the third part, which is looking into the future a bit, starting to see, okay, what are the likely projections, looking at what could happen in the future. So that's really how we how we update the megatrends.
So, so you have,
But
sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
But in the Megatrends Hub, so the website I've just shared with you, you also have access to tools to help people make sense of the trends for what they're interested in. So you take your topic, put it on the table, and then go around with all the mega trends. You do that also in a collective way. Try to assess, okay, how each of the mega trends is likely to impact my topic. Then you prioritize, and then you can go into a more oriented, let's say, strategic thinking relating to the mega trends. So these
Excellent.
are all tools available in Creative Commons licenses, so everybody can use that.
All right. So to summarize, you are organizing workshop, inviting experts from different disciplines, from the European Commission or external experts, to discuss the historical part, the recent changes, the last 3 years, and then you monitor or you predict the future developments regarding this, depending on the potential that this trend has. No?
Yes, but we never try to predict. So in foresight, for example, we know that prediction is impossible. So forget trying to predict. We don't predict anything. We just help people understand what drives change today, and how these drivers of change, could evolve, and help people actually deal with this uncertainty. So when you develop scenarios moving forward, it helps you understand how things could, you explore the range of possible futures going forward, but you don't try to put a probability on different things. You could try to do things maybe for the very short term, and some people are engaged in things that they call like super forecasting, for example. But once you start to want to think about the long term, this is completely impossible. So we try to help people understand how different the future could look like, to help people be aware of uncertainties, but we're not trying to predict what's going to happen.
Excellent. So Gediminas, you got, all the tips now, no? Regarding your task. So I have another question. I realized that the foresight is also like a way of thinking, a way of working, if I understood well. And you mentioned, some of the soft skills or competencies that they are essential for people to work in such a unit or to work under, the foresight framework. So, how do you develop this? For example, how do you develop, this kind of soft skills? What kind of training do you provide? What kind of, how do you work in order, by the way that you are working to cultivate these competencies? And then a second part of my question, you mentioned these 4 levels of progression, starting from foundational, intermediate, advanced, and expert. So if right now I would like to work for the foresight, this is an example, and I am on the foundational level, what kind of training you are going to provide me to go on advanced? Only that by the time I'm going to get to become, an advanced expert, or you providing something that you accelerate this process?
So we do, so following the development of this progression model, we have started to actually develop specific trainings. Okay, but it's a whole family of trainings because there are so many foresight approaches and so many methods that there are different types of trainings depending on what you want to learn. So for example, if you want to learn how to develop scenarios, there are different methods to build scenarios, so we can teach you the different methods. What we've started to develop and push more actually in the European Commission is a training that explains both the basic concepts of foresight and how to apply them to ex-ante impact assessments of policies. So we show people, how we use scenarios to actually stress test policies, because that's something that they are confronted with on a regular basis in the Commission. So we are also, so the horizon scanning that we are running, for example, we are running very much in an inclusive way, not only across the Commission, but also using scanners from across European institutions. So we have a very broad range of people that feed information. And then we have developed a sense-making process behind this to extract valuable information from horizon scanning. So we also teach people, so I give regular trainings on the scenario exploration system, for example, teaching people how to use scenarios to understand what they would mean for people's topics of interest. So we have a whole range of trainings that are available depending on what specifically you're interested in.
And these trainings are available for free, or we should pay a fee in order to follow?
No, we give them for free, but they are oriented. I mean, we only provide trainings within the European Commission or through the EIPA, the European Institute of Public Administration. And our problem is a problem of resources, because we could easily become just a training body. Our problem is that we have real life projects to run in the meantime. So our capacity to actually give trainings is a bit limited, but we are working now with the Secretary General of the Commission and the EU Policymaking Hub to actually find other people who can give these trainings for us.
Mm-hmm. And these trainings are available to the web, so someone can check, what kind of trainings, even though that we cannot follow?
I don't know, to tell you the truth. Maybe the EIPA makes that available. I have no idea. The trainings we give you, usually we just give them in real time, and very often they are, I mean, it's not trainings we record because they are very much participatory. So there's only limited added value to having them, recorded. So of course, the basics of foresight, that's easy to find everywhere. I mean, we're not the only providers. But then once you get into applying foresight, then we like to actually make people try things out during our trainings.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's this practice which is really valuable.
Okay, thank you. I will give the floor to Asta and then to Mladen. Asta, the floor is yours.
Laurent, thank you very much for the insight into foresight. That was really, really good. But actually, I think that was a very good time for all of us to reflect on our own strategies, and especially on strategic management at the universities and different networks, different associations, as Athena is. But my question is about, I was wondering how those think tanks and foresight forces, how to institutionalize them in the best way. You mentioned those participative workshops. That could be one technique to somehow to convey the message, to make those who are in a strategic decision level, to make techniques. What would be a, let's say, powerful tool at the institutional level, probably, or any institutional level?
That's a difficult question, because at the core, foresight is about collective intelligence, and it's about people thinking together. So good foresight is always inclusive and always participatory. There's no way around this. I mean, you can apply these methods on your own in your office, fine, they will work. But the insights that you will generate through this are not going to be very valuable, because it's just going to repeat what you think anyway. So the whole point is to have tools that help generate this collective intelligence that is unavoidable now to make sense of the complexity of today's world. This is way beyond any single brain. So for example, end of this month, we're going to organize a workshop for the next strategic foresight report of the Commission, where we want to reflect on the sustainable transition. And there we will have about 45 very different experts coming from all over. I mean, not only the institutions, but really from all over. And we map the expertise that we need to make sure that we have a maximum diversity in the group to reflect on these complex issues. So this is really something we're always trying to do. And then there are so many methods that we really use the method best applied, or the combination of methods best applied to the question that we get. For example, 3 years ago now, we ran an exercise on the future of customs in the EU, because people wanted to get ready for the next 50 years of the customs union. So we ran a process for the customs 2040. And this was a process that lasted over a year, where we applied a whole sequence of methods. So we started with a in-depth scoping exercise. We followed this with horizon scanning together with a Delphi survey. Then we developed scenarios in a deductive way. Then we made high-level decision makers explore the scenarios to feed a strategic brainstorming that they had. Then we developed a vision after this. Then we engaged decision makers with the vision. So first we developed that with the stakeholders, and then with the decision makers. So then we had a vision accepted at the policymaking level. And after that, we actually engaged in a road mapping exercise, to inform really with specifics, the policymaking process. So we combined all these methods in one huge process on one topic. And that allowed us to actually reach not only all the key stakeholders, the international organizations, the industry, import-export sector, the policymakers, the whole shebang, academics. We had, again, 45, 50 people coming from very different environments to really develop rich scenarios that would allow us to avoid any elephant in the room, at least see whatever might come. And then we alternated between engaging with the stakeholders and then engaging with the policymakers, and back to the stakeholders and the policymakers. And actually in the end, the project lasted for almost 18 months. But that was really successful in influencing the EU policymaking process. But we very rarely just apply one method. We usually combine methods.
Thank you very much. I got my lesson. First, to develop vision with the stakeholders, later move on decision makers level. Okay, thank you.
Yes, one issue we're facing very often is time. With foresight, we want to influence the decision makers, but of course, the highest level decision makers are time poor, and serious foresight takes time. And so that's why we are working like this in alternative ways. So developing scenarios with stakeholders, because that takes time. But then the scenario exploration is a tool that allows people to do that in only 3 hours. And there we can reach the high level decision makers, because we can catch them for a few hours in a way that we cannot catch them for a process that lasts for several months with day-long workshops. So the toolbox, let's say, is so rich that it allows us to work on different levels.
Thank you. I would like to give the floor now to Mladen. I don't know if you insist.
Yes,
okay,
yes. It's actually, if I would start my questions, we would sit next month. But I would like first to thank you for taking time to explaining to us a little more. Foresight is this is partly my fault that you are here today.
No problem.
I have
I'm glad to be here.
Discovered also in the recent times that we as a university network, as a university alliance, might very much help you with what you're short of. You cannot reach so many people because of the limited capacities. And this is also why Kostas mentioned more of a collaboration than just teaching us foresight. We would like, of course, in the first phase to learn more about it. And if we look at this beautiful flower that you showed to us, there are a lot of parts of the flower where universities can be very good knowledge providers, critical thinking, strategic planning, scientific methods, and data-based things
Absolutely.
like that. There we can be of a big effort. Also, we have a big audience of potential stakeholders that might be useful data providers. And here I see the main potential, because we also have the possibility of multiply this to other university alliances in some way, which is in some way also our European dimension mission, if I may say in these 3 short words. Therefore, I personally look very much forward to potential next meetings. More and more in the strategic papers that I read, the term foresight appears, also triggered by the pandemic. For instance, in March, there will be a very traditional medicine and law conference, one track on foresight. how to foresee the next pandemic and things like that. And they are asking me for speakers because I never can hold my mouth. And in May, there will be also a conference on future jobs in the framework of the presidency of Slovenia of the European Union strategy for the Danube region. 17th and 18th of May, where also the topic of foresight will be there, because it is a fact that universities, when they start to educate, their product will be on the market in 5 years in the ideal case.
Yeah.
Or if you want to have a PhD, then it's already
Longer,
8 to 9
yeah.
years. And if you don't know what you do, then it might end up spending a lot of money without result in the end. So here, also for the benefit of universities as such, and also for the benefit of our third mission, as we call it, knowledge transfer. And I also, in the discussions also with both of your colleagues, first with the head of the center and then with Mrs. Ball and now you, I have discovered that there is no real education for that. I'm not speaking about a study program, but actually there is not what also Asta meant, more systematic way of how to bring foresight closer to managers, medium management, to those who provide the decision makers with data on their decisions. And here I think there is a big gap that Athena could help to fill by time, of course, not tomorrow, but at the first we are very interested to learn from you more and more, and also like our colleague from not from Klagenfurt, I'm sorry, I always connect Carinthia to Klagenfurt. I apologize totally here again.
No, that's fine. I'm actually from Klagenfurt, but I'm in Villach.
I know, but this is somehow in my DNA. If I talk about Carinthia, I talk mainly of Klagenfurt. I know that you have also other seats because we are Erasmus partners for several years now already. But here I think about methods also. If you can on this level reach the higher ladder in the 4 steps of progression, then universities can be very useful in the competence. We call it in Athena competence clusters. It might help to also spread more, not only awareness, but also the components to better strategically plan. This is also in the Horizon program. I've been accidentally to some conferences when they didn't know that universities are present, and they speak very frankly. The universities should do more about with the funding that they get from European Commission in the sense of transfer to society. So this is a challenge we are aware of, and I think foresight could help us very much to be more effective in the sense of input-output relation in our research and education or training, maybe I could say, because a full study program for 5 years is again too rigid to be adaptable for foresight trainings and things like that. So I'm very grateful for your presentation. It was very long again, but I promise not to speak too much anymore. Thank you.
No, fine, interesting.
There is a question. Thank you, Bladen. There is a question from Gediminas from Vilnius Tech.
Yes, thank you. So I'm looking at the website, Competence Center on Foresight, and as you mentioned, Laurent, there's several interesting things and methods. And maybe you could comment on the contents of that web page and those tools a bit more. I'm new to this, but let's say I'm trying to develop some little strategy for networking, etc. Where could I start? What would you suggest to try me to, yeah?
That's an impossible question to answer. Because in order for foresight to be useful, the first thing to do is to actually properly scope. Why do you want to do foresight? That's the first question to ask. And depending on the answer to that question, then the path forward and the methods you will use will be very different. So the first question is always, you cannot just say, oh, I want to do foresight, on this topic. That's not enough. You really need to engage in a proper reflection on scoping. So what system are you talking about? For example, first, as I was taking the example of customs, it was really interesting there because the first thing we did was a workshop, a scoping workshop with people from 10 member states. So the key responsibles of the customs services in 10 different EU member states. And they just did not all have the same understanding of what customs were. Okay, so in order to actually know what we were going to talk about and know what we were going to make scenarios on, it was very important and interesting to have this workshop, because some people had a very restrictive view of customs, some others had a very wide view of customs. And so depending on the scope and the answers you get there and where you draw the line around the system, what you're going to do and what you're going to find out is going to be very different. So I think my recommendation number one is this. First, know what you're talking about and know why you want to apply foresight to this. What do you want to get out of the process in the end? Once you have answered these two questions, then you can start to move forward, because then you can go into the toolbox and say, because the foresight toolbox is enormous, there are so many methods. So then you can start to put together the set of methods that you will need to actually get the answers you want. And then you will be able to actually determine what kind of expertise do I need? What is the mix of expertise I need to put together to actually make a meaningful process? And then a few months ago, actually, we published a handbook on co-creation for policy, where we have actually put together the key principles of how to do good foresight. And it goes beyond foresight, strictly speaking. It's this. The first thing is, scope, and, talk to your customer, make sure that everybody understands why they want to do this and why and what, this is all about, what we're talking about. The second is making sure that we put together the right expertise around the table that, for the path security process. The third thing is, give the work to professionals, so apply structured methods, to all these people. Make sure that you spend enough time actually digesting the results of your workshops. So making sure that you don't underestimate how much work it is after the workshop to extract the maximum value from this. So you have a whole structured approach, let's say, to follow, which is, I think, the first thing to respect before, selecting the specific methods that you will apply, in the workshops. And the mix will depend very much on your objectives. It's so of course scenarios is the classic. It's something that happens quite often, and it's the workhorse of foresight, let's say. So that's really the most obvious. But around this, there are so many different ways, depending on the time you have available, depending on the people you can put together, depending on so many things. Then you can apply a megatrends, implications assessment tool, or you can apply a futures wheel, which are very, very fast, screening exercises that can help you already get some added value very quickly. But then they don't give you as much depth of work as if you, engage in big scenario building exercise. So it's really an answer that I cannot just give one. It depends so much on the circumstances, on the objectives.
And the book you mentioned, is it online maybe?
Yes, I can probably put it in the.
Thank you.
In the chat.
So Gediminas, after this presentation, do you think that we need your task team?
Do you need my task team? It's even harder to answer now. I mean, it depends.
Yeah, all right. I'm kidding. Anyhow, I think that we should close here. I would like to thank again Laurent. I think that Bladen provide us a nice idea. I think that we should sign as an Athena European University some kind of collaboration with Foresight. From what sense we can provide you? We are more than thousands of scientists and researchers. So probably if you are looking for experts, during this brainstorming that we are doing, probably Athena could be a good source for you. And, on the vice versa, we can get, the knowledge from these surveys and brainstorming. So if you can send me to which person we should speak in order to sign an agreement between Athena and Foresight, it will be very helpful from both sides. I can see, the benefit now from both sides. So I would like to thank you again, Laurent, for this very deep, very deep and very well explained presentation, how to make Foresight. I thought Foresight was an institution, but now I think that it's like how to make Foresight a way of brainstorming.
It's
and
a
working.
way of thinking.
Yeah.
It's
Thank
a
you
mindset.
very much. And please send me your presentation that you have already sent it to me, but also, the contact person in order to go ahead and make, a stronger collaboration with your institution as an Athena European University. I think that we have a last question from Tatiana.
So before
Please,
that, just to respond directly to you, the person you should contact is probably Victoria Kovacs from the Secretariat General of the European Commission.
Can you send me?
Yes. And I've just put the link to the co-creation for policy handbook that we were discussing about a few minutes ago.
So, Tatiana, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you. Actually, the question is for you, Kostas, where the recording of this meeting will be available.
I will send you a link. I will send you a link in the YouTube just only for us, for this recording. I have to speak with the people from Vilnius Tech with my friend. I have placed it to my to-do list in order to transfer everything to the Athena YouTube channel, because I have everything in my YouTube channel. We need to transfer this to the Athena YouTube channel. Asta, please, I will contact this person. I don't remember right now his name, but we will do it as fast as possible. Thank you, Bladen. What? Please,
I didn't finish, Kostas. Sorry, and Mladen. And if I understood correctly before, Laurent sent you also the slides, so might be it would be nice also to get the slides somewhere separate if somebody just wants to have the look for the slides.
I will place them to the teams.
Thanks for the wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Bladen.
I would just like to inform everybody. I think Kostas some months ago, in every country of the EU, there's somebody dedicated to foresight. The European Commission is building some kind of team represented by different national representatives who work on the issue of foresight. In Slovenia, I got the new name last week. It took me very long. I was in contact 1 year already with the lady, and then she told me there will be somebody new. And half year later, I know now who it is. So there are also national contact points to address. They are mainly supposed to enter probably national views to the whole European picture, to the big picture. And I think also to keep the big picture is a very good base to strategically plan, because you sometimes get lost in details and then you forget why you do things. Just this additional information for you. Thank you.
I think that this is a homework for all of us regarding the work package through the observatory to find out what are the national contact points in national level, and then try to organize events similar than with this one. Of course, Laurent has been committed. This is just an introduction from Laurent. I have recorded this, and we will continue this series of lectures that will help all of us. And thank you very much, all of you, and see you very soon. I don't know, tomorrow we will have some Athena meeting for sure. Bye-bye, and thank you very much, Laurent.
Bye. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.